happy summer, happy June, happy Pride Month, and happy birthday to me. I have a wonderful, inspiring interview with Bari Newport coming up, and I can't wait to share it with you. So let's go. So hello, Bari.
Hi.
It's wonderful to meet you.
And you.
And so let's just start off by talking about you and when did you start doing theater?
When I was very little in Columbus, Ohio, I saw I was like, I don't know, 5, maybe even younger. I saw a performance of Babes in Toyland. And soon after that, I saw a performance of, it was the touring original cast of Annie, and at the Palace Theater in Columbus, Ohio. And Babes in Toyland, I just thought, I mean, I can still picture it, was so imaginative, and it just was like, I mean, it was toys that were coming to life, for God's sake, you know, for a little kid. It was
girl, that's incredible.
Yeah, and it really, I just remember that feeling of being totally transported, you know. And my parents, my mother spent a lot of time reading me stories and, you know, feeding my imagination, like a lot of kids, I would hope, have the opportunity to do. And with Annie, I mean, that is the story for every little kid, especially in like 1980 or whenever it was that I saw it. And soon after that, we ended up moving to Stamford, Connecticut, which is basically a suburb of New York City, a commuter town, really, especially at that time. And I could sing really loud, it turned out. And I just begged and begged my parents to take me to auditions. And there were, you know, kind of have your pick of the litter, being in Stamford, Connecticut, where so many great American historic summer stocks are and historic regional theaters are, not to mention just all the commercial work happening in New York. And so I just started singing places and being a pretty ambitious, very young child. And you know, and as time went on, my mother told me, and my mother was not a theater person at all, and my father is a corporate engineer, that if I really wanted to be an actress, I had to learn theater and become an expert at every element of it. And I just seemed like good advice, so I believed her. And so at 12, I started volunteering 3 days a week at a local professional theater company called Stamford Theater Works. I started by being dropped off at the back of a furniture store, and that's where their office was. And I sorted headshots, I house managed, I worked in the office, and I learned so much at such an early age. And from there, you know, anytime I wasn't cast, I would start producing myself, and produced all kinds of things. Like you said you were doing plays with your neighborhood. I was doing plays with my neighborhood too. As a very young child in Ohio, I would do plays with my neighborhood, or I would just like be a leader of things. I had a little running group called the Dolphins because my father was a runner, and so we would run. And I would write about theater for my high school newspaper. Anything I could do to further the art form before I really even understood what that meant. I would just be an advocate for, or a leader of, or a participant in. And because I had that volunteer job for quite some time from middle school through high school, I ended up working at was the youngest intern at the Westport Country Playhouse when I was 15, got my driver's license while I was there. And, I learned how to build sets with union guys. I learned how to prop shows. And soon after I got my license, I was driving a U-Haul to New York City, to the Flower District to pick up palm fronds. I was going to rehearsals in New York City for the first national tour of Dancing at Lunasa and The World Goes Round, like right when those shows were being really put on the road. And I just had every opportunity one could imagine while I was continuing to act and write. And
wow, what an incredible
yeah.
experience for a young person. That's just amazing. Sounds really beautiful.
Yeah,
So you started writing too, you said.
Well, writing about theater. I'm not a playwright. I've certainly written a number of things, but I'm not a playwright. I don't enjoy writing plays, but I absolutely spent a lot of time writing about theater and promoting different aspects of the art form, and promoting and explaining the American regional theater system to as many people as I can. From the moment I understood it, I really got on board with the uniqueness of why regional theater in this country is nonprofit. And I've really spent my career spreading the good word like a missionary would to communities all over the country who really have never put together, what the difference is between why the ticket they purchase for a commercial show on Broadway might be $200, and yet the professional regional theater in their town, is a $65 ticket. Like, why is that? Well, it's because the regional theater, the nonprofit professional American regional theater, has the same mission as every other nonprofit, the Humane Society, a hospital, the YMCA, and that is to serve its community. And so my driving force for being a part specifically of regional theater in this country is always about community, building community, being a part of a community, creating community.
That's really amazing. Yeah. So you feel, how do you feel about working at Gable Stage? How do you feel about being in that community?
I mean, first of all, I knew Gable Stage from a previous chapter of my life when I was at Florida Repertory Theater, which is in Fort Myers. I was at Florida Rep from 2002 to 2007. And so I knew not only Gable Stage, but I knew Joe Adler, who ran it for 23 years and of course was considered the godfather of South Florida theater. And when I was at Florida Rep, it was from when I was 26 to 31. And it was a very important time in my life as a professional actor, but as an arts, I hate to call myself an administrator. I never do. I always call myself a producer. Mm-hmm. And that is because I had an award once. It was a theater communications group. It was called a Future Leaders Grant, and it was supported by the Doris Duke and Carnegie Foundations. And it was a mentor-mentee grant. So you had to be nominated by a leader in the field. And there were all these things that went around with this grant, along with this grant. It was a 2-year grant. And one of those things was the award ceremony itself, which had various components to it. And one of those was sitting around a big table in a huge high rise in Manhattan. And I don't remember if it was the Doris Duke headquarters or the Carnegie had some big table, and all of the awardees were around it, the mentees and the mentors. And it was one of those things where it was like, everybody who's who considers themselves a designer, raise their hand. Everybody who considers themselves an artist, raise their hand. Everybody who considers themselves an actor. And when they said administrator, only women raised their hands.
Huh.
And I thought that was so interesting. And there's something about the word administrator that sounds like a secretary, right? Like an
Yes,
administrative assistant. And I took that to heart, and I thought about like what I really do. And I produce, right? I'm a producer amongst many other, we call them, right, slashes. I'm a slasher. Producer, director, actor, perform, right? I mean, everybody in the theater is a slasher, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Because it all really goes back to the heart of the most old school notion of what a theater company is, which is if you can make your own work, you'll always work. So if you can build your own set, if you understand the economics of what it is that you're doing and the field that you're in, if you can hang a light, if you can turn on your car lights and make a play in a parking lot, in a bathroom, in a hallway, in a park, like if you can make it yourself, you'll always have work. And that's how I've, built my career. And that certainly is what I'm attracted to in other people, period. Not even necessarily in theater, just in general. Just do it. The Nike School of Acting, just do it.
Just do it.
In terms of Gable Stage, though, because I knew the company and was in such a formative part of my own career and was being mentored by a very strong producer type at Florida Rep at the time. Every time I would see Joe, all the artistic directors in the state would gather around him. I would see him every year at the Florida Professional Theater Association auditions, and Joe would hold court. And I just watched as all the other artistic directors admired Joe so much. How could he do this provocative work? How could he be in such a beautiful location? Everybody admired the quality of the work of Gable Stage, the provocativeness of the work of Gable Stage, the incredibly cool location of the theater company. And I too saw work here and felt the same way. So as my career took me to many other places, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Pasadena, back to Atlanta, and then to Bangor, Maine, for 9.5 years. I really wasn't focused on Florida anymore, or Gable Stage, certainly. But when I saw that Joe had died in April of 2020, I was absolutely distracted by trying to keep my own company afloat and able to navigate the pandemic. But I was curious as to what was going to happen with Gable Stage, because my gosh, I really hoped that someone fabulous took it over, because I did understand what an important role Gable Stage played in the ecosystem of Miami, and was just kind of curious as to who the next ballsy.
Did you ever think it was going to be you?
Person. Not really. It really wasn't even on my radar at all. My husband and I ended up buying a house in Maine. We thought, oh, it looks like we're going to be here for a while, so we might as well have chickens and do the whole Maine thing. We had been living in like a very, very cool loft next to the theater for almost the entirety of the 9 years. So we bought this cute little craftsman house on 3.5 acres that had a fantastic apple tree and a huge garden. And we were like one day away from getting chickens, and a headhunter came a knocking, and and others had come before, and I had gotten like kind of close with 2 other positions, but neither of them, for very different reasons, were something that I would give up what we had in Maine for, which was a company that is now a 50-year-old theater company with a mission of to inspire a lifelong passion for the art form in Stephen King's town, where Stephen King was the largest donor. which really came on my radar because I was doing a Stephen King, John Mellencamp musical at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta called Ghost Brothers of Darkland County. And Mr. King said, do you know there's a theater in my town? And I did, for totally other reasons. I had a friend who had been the interim artistic director there. But I mean, I really wasn't knowledgeable or really that experienced at producing big musicals. But what my interest was heavily, and I had spoken on panels, and I was very interested in rural theater, in what communities outside of New York and Los Angeles and Chicago did for professional theater, because it made a huge impact in my life as somebody who moved a lot as a kid, whose father got transferred a lot. Penobscot Theater Company in Bangor, Maine fit the bill perfectly for me to really focus on community building. And what I learned there was, I mean, I learned a lot of things there, but what I learned there was how a theater company can truly be a beacon of hope, be a beacon of vibrancy and color and optimism in a place that had for a long time been what could be qualified as a rundown New England town. And so in our 9.5 years there, we really focused on being the center, not just of that town, but of the region. And we built that company up by over $1 million in our time there, which in other markets may not even be that impressive, but in that market and in a rural community, and what's the definition of rural? Well, it's that there's no major corporations. So it's, law firms that are giving, $5,000 to $7,500. It's small companies. So therefore 70%-ish of our operating budget, which by the way is the exact same as Gable Stage, but the economics are opposite, come from ticket sales. So we served double the amount of people as Gable Stage. We owned many properties, from a scene shop to the Opera House itself, which used to seat 1,750 people, so an enormous building. We owned actor and artist housing. We owned an education space. And yet the budget for the company was the exact same budget as what Gable Stage is now.
Okay.
So when I found myself moved into a new house, but completely not unpacked, because if we moved in on January 1st, I knew we were moving on February 7th. I became extremely interested in how my interest in rural theater could be translated into Coral Gables, which is almost completely the opposite. But what I found is that providing hope and optimism and vibrancy and making sure that a community's imagination is stretched and healthy and muscly is critical to a community's ability to problem solve. And there's so many problems we as citizens must solve. Losing one's imagination is a terrible thing. And the 9/11 papers started with, "We never could have imagined." That's our job, no matter if you're in Bangor, Maine, or Tennessee, or Los Angeles, or Coral Gables, Florida. It's essential that we are a center for imagination.
That's brilliant. Yeah, and using imagination to solve problems is
Critical.
It's so important. Yeah, it's critical. It's you can't really solve problems otherwise. You can't do it with just, some kind of formula. You need,
Exactly. And yet people, grown-ups, right? Like at a certain point, we stop exercising the imagination. And it's a muscle, really, like any other muscle. It requires stimuli, right? And it requires sort of a consistency of thinking broadly, thinking beyond. And to do that with your own community can be an extremely powerful activity that can make change.
so tell me a little bit about your upcoming season. What vision do you have for that, or what kind of shows do you have
Well, first
planned?
of all, I mean, the mission of this theater company is to confront today's issues and ideas. And someone asked me recently when I changed that. I haven't changed it. That's always been the mission of the company.
I always felt like that was Joe's mission too, from the shows that I saw there.
Well, Joe's not the founder of this company. This company was founded by two female best friends who grew up in Coral Gables. It was founded in 1979 as the Florida Shakespeare Theater, started by producing plays at the historic house Vizcaya, and in time moved to two other locations, and eventually 25 years ago, to this location at the Biltmore Hotel, which is the old stables of the Biltmore. Joe was, Joe was brought on to lead the company. In fact, I'm looking right now at a newspaper article from the Herald, which documents that. And the title of that article is Florida Shakespeare Reborn as Gable Stage. And there's a picture of him sitting with Ellen Beck, who's one of those two best friends, who founded the original company. So really, Gable Stage has been in production continuously since its inception in 1979. But it's been Gable Stage with this theater, with this mission to confront today's issues and ideas for now 25 years, 23 of which Joe Adler led. But that's always been the mission of the company. So first and foremost, choosing a season, I want to make sure that every play connects with that mission substantially. And I always think about what Joe told his audiences over and over, which was, I want to make sure that people go home talking, not just about where we're going to have dinner, but also about the play that they just experienced. So those are kind of my two guides, the mission and making sure that there's something meaty enough or complex enough to talk about. Beyond that, I look for 5 elements in choosing a season. One is, can we do it well? And that alone has many different components to it. Of course, the space itself is one of those components, but also just the most pragmatic operations of the company. Can we make it happen? Do we have the staff? Do we have the resources to bring it to life as fully as we can? Some of that has to do with, do we have the people in town to make it happen, whether that's people on stage or off? And if not, then that means, and in town, I mean, what does even in town mean? You said are you still in Pompano Beach?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we would have to house you, right? I mean, there's no way that you can go back and forth, right, to Pompano Beach every day.
Wouldn't be much fun, no.
No, and it'd be really difficult to give a decent performance after being, on a steering wheel for.
And especially in that Miami traffic. It's not
Yeah, right. So, I mean, the Actors Union says that a local actor is within 50 miles, and many actors, many choreographers, many directors, many electricians, many projection designers, many people, first of all, have moved to Atlanta, number one, because
Exactly.
film and TV have moved to Atlanta. And that's been an eye-opener to me. I mean, I remember when Florida as a state, much like California, was one of the few states in the country where you could really make a living as an actor. And the foundation of that had to be with film and television, including commercials, music videos, etc.
Being
Because that's what,
subsidized, right?
huh?
Being subsidized, right?
With the tax credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's obviously a lot more money for a performer, but also for an electrician or for any of the many people that work in the film industry. That became part of the ecosystem of how anyone in theater could survive. You know, it's hard to make a living in theater. I mean, everybody knows that. It has been from the beginning of time. We've been beggars and prostitutes since the beginning of time, because because of what I said, that the purpose of theater, the purpose of nonprofit theater, is to serve a community. It's not to make money. And even if you are in the commercial theater and your mission is to make money and pay all the funders back, it's almost impossible because it's a manpower heavy art form that cannot be reproduced many, many, many times. So the math of it is very, very, very difficult to work out. And there's so many components to it. Everything from weather to population to subject matter to how many people you need to make it happen, both on stage and off. There's so many different components to it that it's really difficult to not subsidize. And if you don't have a healthy ecosystem in a community for professionals to be able to make a real living, especially in an environment where it's an extremely high cost of living, back to like, can we do it well? I better have a good plan and some resources to bring in who we need to bring in and house them for what turns out to be 8 or 9 or 10 weeks at a time with kitchens in order to do that project. So can we do it well does not necessarily mean can we do it well in the Gable Stage space. It also means, can we do it well financially, which is the second, thing on my list of 5, which is, does it play its role financially? And does it play its role financially does not necessarily mean, does it make money? Because at the end of the day, if you, just take our budget, which is about 2.2 million right now, and you divide it by the number of plays that we do, which at this point is 5, pretty quickly you realize, my God, there's no way that a play would make whatever that number is, $400 and some thousand each. That's what it costs, really, So, but does it play its role financially? Are there other are there sponsorships for this particular play? Is it a one-person play that is going to be less costly than something with 6 people? Does it play its role in the great menu of the season from a financial aspect? So from a financial perspective. So not every play costs the same. Not every play is going to bring in the same. The menu part of it, and not every play is going to be sponsored at the same rate as another play. Because this is the opposite of the math that a rural theater usually contends with, which is 70% coming from ticket sales, because the mission is a more sophisticated mission, Gable Stage, to confront today's issues and ideas. That's like a more heady mission. 70% comes from contributed sources. So it's completely the opposite of Maine for me. So how I spend my time is also very different, The third component of choosing a season is creating a menu, like in a restaurant, right? You want a wide variety of work that all is connected to the mission. So we try and do a new play, try and do a classic play, try and do a comedy, try and do a local story. So try and make a menu as if we were in a restaurant of something that suits every palate, but all belongs in the same restaurant. The fourth is what or who is the star? So what are we going to rally around for this particular production? Is it literally a star? Is there a person who the whole thing is going to be focused on? Is it a subject? Is it an element of the production? Is it the set? Is it the set designer? Is it the director? Is it a philosophy that's going into creating the art of it, either physically or in the writing? Is it the playwright? What or who is the star of that piece? And then the fifth element that we look for is why here, why now? Why is it important to tell this story, to produce this play here at this location in this community now at this time in our human history? So those are the 5 elements that I try and look for when putting seasons together, which, happen a year or 2 or 3 or 5. I mean, some pieces, take a long time to make it from, hey, wouldn't it be great if we, to actually appearing on a season.
Are you, how many of the plays in the next season will you be directing personally?
I'm directing 2. I'm directing the Thanksgiving play, which is currently on Broadway and is the first play, we think, on Broadway, written by a Native American woman. I've known Larissa Fasthorse for many years through TCG, and it's a play that I read, I think, starting in 2018 when I was still in Maine. I was running a company called Penobscot Theater Company, and we were doing a lot of work with our neighbors, the Penobscot Nation. We ended up not producing the Thanksgiving play there then. It wasn't the right place or the right time. But Gable Stage now is the perfect place for this comedy. And it also is the perfect time to be talking about erasure. So I'm directing the Thanksgiving play, and I'm also directing the Lehman trilogy, which we got the rights to by sending a giant cookie to the licensing companies. This is not the first time I've done this. This is probably the 3rd time I've sent something. Second time for a giant cookie, and we wrote subprime mortgages or bust. We want Lehman trilogy, Gable Stage. So we got the rights.
That's very funny. That's awesome. I really like the Thanksgiving play. I recently heard it on audio. I've never seen it, but I did hear it. It was really funny, really interesting.
Yeah.
Brings up a lot of great issues,
Yeah.
appropriation and
Yeah.
Ignorance.
Yeah. And the Florida, Miami in particular, but just Florida in general has like every indigenous story in every part of this country is complicated. But Miami, it's a complicated, it's uber complicated, just because of the many different, erasure is some of the question becomes, when did the erasing begin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's definitely ever present. From banning all the books in schools. I mean, that's just insane to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Although I guess, in my last couple of years of being a teacher, I got a hint of it because they definitely didn't want me to teach literature.
Right.
crazy.
Yeah,
They had some kind of brainwashing software that I was supposed to use. So
really.
yeah, basically, I mean, there was this one question me and my students were supposed to answer. It was one of those testing questions, and we all came up with a certain answer, but apparently it was the wrong answer because it was too liberal.
Wow.
And the correct answer was completely conservative and right wing.
Huh.
So
Wow.
that taught me a lot about the testing industry. I mean, there were a lot of different questions
Right.
like that, but that one really stood out in particular because, you know, it was just so blatant.
There's a lot of power in keeping the masses ignorant and not able to think for ourselves. There's a great power in that.
Yeah, because if you can just tell people what to think, then you don't have to worry about anything. You can just continue to usurp more and more power till nobody can do anything, which is
Right.
kind of what's happening in Florida. But it's up to us to keep the fight going.
Yeah. And I mean, imagination has a huge part of that if you start thinking or forgetting that something else is possible, it's pretty easy to be a sheep.
And to me, depriving children of that power of the imagination, refusing to allow them to read certain books
Mm-hmm.
is criminal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's totally against this country's foundation
The
of
Constitution? Yeah, it is.
freedom
Yeah.
of speech. I mean,
I don't know if you
everything.
saw the Judy Blume documentary that's out now, but I mean, she was just putting in perspective, through her life, the many times, but especially like at the beginning of Reagan, that she just like went to bat over and over and over about her books, but books in general being banned. So this certainly isn't the first time, but I think it's shocking every time.
And then the erasure of African American history, uh,
Uh,
that is also criminal.
yeah.
And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, people who promote that just need to be prosecuted
Yeah.
eventually, because that's like denying so many of our citizens the rights to know their own history. And also, I mean, for other people to know that history too. It's a part of all of our history.
Right.
It's so essential to understanding what's going on in the country.
Yeah, people don't know that. People don't know the indigenous history. They certainly don't know the Black history. They don't know. They don't. I mean, it's taught in one way, or we're fed it in one way, and we're, asked to not question that, and we're not given really any of the tools to even think to question that. My strategy with like theater though, and I've just kind of always been this way, or maybe I learned this at some point, was just to put my head down, and instead of I don't spend a lot of time outwardly fighting. I spend a lot more time putting my head down and just doing. So like our first play, How I Learned What I Learned, is August Wilson's autobiography that he wrote before he died in 2005. It's never been done in Miami. And I like it because it is not only not a story of Black trauma, it's a story of, in many ways, Black joy. But it's also very much an American story. And most importantly, to me anyway, it's an artist's story. And it puts finding one's voice and the power and importance of the individual as creator, as divine creator, front and center in a story of a Black man. So we are working, yesterday we spent a lot of time working to bring the actor who's starring in it, Robert Strain, is a local actor who has been a professor at FMU, Florida Memorial University, for many, many years. And so they are embarking on, I think it's a 4-year, it's called a QEP, qualitative educational learning focus of writing, specifically writing with pride. And so we're working to bring 100+ students to see this production, send teaching artists, playwrights into the school before they see the production and after, to inspire and work with these young citizens on writing performative works of their own stories. And then after they see the production, to stage at least some of those stories.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
It's a good one.
Amazing idea. Yeah. It's so beneficial to budding artists, you know.
Yeah, and not just artists, like we're all artists. Everybody's an artist. That's the beauty of being human. We are endowed with a godly or a divine or the creative spirit. We all have that. That's the whole thing, right? We all are creators. We all have the divine inside of us. All of us.
That's true. I mean, and no matter what you do, you know, if you're involved in any kind of problem solving, you're an artist.
Yeah. Absolutely. If you are a gardener, if you are a imaginator of any kind, someone who reads and allows their mind to go, someone who meditates and allows their mind to go, someone who's a leader and brings groups of people together, you can someone who's a cook, someone who's a chef, someone who is a mother. We are all creators, all of us. We can make something out of nothing, and we can believe it to be, even if it's not there.
That's another important thing to believe, you know, to never give up believing, because once you give up believing, there's emptiness, there's depression, there's a big void. You know, if you have no beliefs, then you're living in a void.
Exactly. And you've lost touch with your own divinity, frankly.
Your own divinity, exactly.
It's what connects us to the earth. It's what connects us to the cosmos. Like, that's the whole thing with art making. First of all, everybody and anyone can do it. And all of us and there's more power in it, the more of us who work at it together. Hence any kind of church or spiritual practice, right? There's power in the group. There's power in creation, especially when it's more than one, you know?
Yes, because we have symbiotic relationships with all humans. In fact, I really believe that each of our lives is a microcosm of the universe. You know,
it is. Carl Sagan said it. We're the stuff, Shakespeare said it, right?
Stuff of stars, stuff that stars are made on.
But we literally are. We literally are, right? We have within us moon dust and stardust and elements that are found throughout the universe. Like, that's literally what we are. Not just what we are, it's what my dog is, that's what my lawn is, that's what the snail is, that's what the tree is. We are divine beings.
Even if you want to, you can't live in isolation. It's impossible. You have to connect with something or someone or some group somehow, just in order to survive. So, or live, and more than that, to live fully, you know. Well, Bari, I really want to thank you. This has been such an inspiring conversation.
Oh, I'm glad. I feel the same way. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And good luck with your next season.
Thanks. We'll send you tickets to Native Gardens, which is such a funny play that opens next week.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's a perfect, it's like such a perfect example of a comedy that totally suits the mission of this organization. It's a pretty like simple basis for a story, which is two neighbors who both have very different visions of what a garden should be in their backyard. But it gets into all kinds of small issues that are parallel to enormous issues that we see on the news every day, but done in such a funny way that everybody can see themselves reflected in. So it's a friendly story, I think, for people of all ages, which not all Gable Stage plays are. And it's a very funny play, which also has been like something I've been interested in. My own personal style has been described as delightful. And at the beginning, I was like, how is my own aesthetic of delight and whimsy at all connected to confront today's issues and ideas, which can feel a little heady and heavy. But I think that I'm finding more ways. And the production we did of A Doll's House Part 2, I think was like the first time that I felt, oh, this is my work. This looks like my work. It feels like my work. It's it is full of delight, but it also totally suits the mission of this play and mission of this organization, and totally allows people to go home not only speaking about the work and the ideas of the play, but hopefully with a light heart and a freedom of expression and of imagination.
One of my favorite parts of that production was you gave each of the characters a little dance step.
Yeah, exactly.
I just love that. It was
gorgeous. Good.
Yeah, it was fun.
Good. Yeah, fun. Theater going should have an element, I do think, of fun, right? People want to have fun. Why not? Why not?
You want to have them think, but you want to have them fun doing it.
Sure. Yeah. And sometimes I don't even know that I want people to necessarily think. I don't necessarily want to be thinking when I'm in the theater. I want to be, sometimes I think with my heart.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel and I think later, or I think about it later, or I have questions about it later. But like in the moment, I really actually don't want to be in my head. I want to be in my heart.
Yeah. Well, for me, the head and the heart are the same thing, pretty much. They're very much connected. So that's just the way I operate, you know.
Lori, someone said to me, and another artistic director said to me that different communities hear in different ways. Some communities hear with their heads first. Some communities hear with their hearts first. And I've seen that to be true. Atlanta hears with their heart first. New York hears with their head first, right? And since I've been here, I've been like, it's not just a community, it's also the theater company within the ecosystem of the community. Gable Stage is one of, multiple theater companies that all are part of a greater ecosystem. So this particular theater, I think, has been known really to speak to people's heads first, right? That it's a sophisticated mission with a learned, sophisticated audience with some heady stuff going on stage. But I think that my brand really does, I think I'm personally more interested in going for the heart first.
Yeah, you make that connection. Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I hope so. Thanks, Lori. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.